Hey everyone, we're back. You're here with Dr. Fullstack. Last time we covered this particular example, context variables, within the OpenAI Swarm repo. Now at this point, the goal is to cover function calling as well as simple loop, just so that you guys have a comprehensive understanding as to how Swarm works and you're able to utilize this agentic orchestration within your own application. So let's get started. Here, let's cover function calling. Within function calling, you can see that the setup is very similar to the others. We import Swarm, an agent, from the Swarm package. Next, this is optional. I've went ahead and downloaded python.env environment, but you can export your OpenAI key directly into your local terminal, and you don't have to utilize this importation here. Now, because I did go ahead and load that .env environment that has my OpenAI key, I went ahead and created an API key variable here, and I'm utilizing the OS package in order to get that environment variable so that when Swarm is initialized, it recognizes that I do have my OpenAI key. Now, why do I need to do that? Well, the reason why I need to do that is because this is a little bit into the Swarm class itself. Here, we see that in the constructor, it's going to go ahead and check whether we have the OpenAI instantiated or not. And OpenAI expects an API key. So that's the reason why we want to go ahead and make sure that we have the API key, or we will get an error in the beginning. But we can go over this entire class another day. Let's go ahead and continue the function calling. Here on line 16, we have a get weather function being defined. It's going to take in an argument and return this here, a mock temperature in Fahrenheit. In line 20, we see that the agent is instantiated for the first time. Here, the agent is taking in 3 arguments: a name, instructions, as well as functions. Now, the function is only one element within that array, and that's the get weather function that we declared in line 16. So now this agent is aware that it's able to utilize this weather function depending on the context of the conversation with the user. Speaking of the conversation context with the user, well, we have in line 26 the messages variable, which is going to initiate our conversation with the agent for us. See, the agent expects some set of messages so that it has context on which functions to call or what this conversation is going to be about, other than the instructions that we provided here, which simply says you are a helpful agent. On line 28, we run the run method, no pun intended, on client, which is Swarm, and we instantiated that on line 13. Lastly, we're going to get this response by extracting the last element in that array that was returned to us, and we'll go ahead and utilize the key content so that we can find out what the agent responded with. So if we run this file, this should be what prints out. Now we're pretending that the user has asked the question, what is the weather in NYC? Based on what we've set up here, it should return this hard-coded value, which is the temperature is 67 degrees Fahrenheit. Let's go ahead and see that in practice. I'll go ahead and open up the terminal. Let's clear our last example. And over here, I'll simply enter the up key twice and change a little bit of the context here. Let's go ahead and write function calling, since that's the name of the file that we're running. I'll go ahead and press enter. And as you can see, the agent responded with the current temperature in New York City is 67 degrees Fahrenheit. Amazing. So the agent setup is very simple, as I've stated several times. Here we set up an agent. We can call the agent Weatherman, and now its only function is to go ahead and get the weather. And we can utilize this within a larger workflow so that individual agents are encapsulated within modules. And if we orchestrate this agent workflow, well, then we can start getting a little more granular with really complex, sophisticated workflows. Let's talk about a sales pipeline. Let's talk about a recruitment agent. Let's talk about so many other tasks that require a lot of complex computation or just thinking or adaptability from the human standpoint. We don't want to replace the human, but we want to enable them with tools to do their job with less brain power. Think of the agent as one of your super employees that doesn't get tired, but does cost a lot of tokens. So in terms of that, that's just a quick demo of function calling. Let's go ahead and check out Simple Loop. Here in Simple Loop, we'll go ahead and from the Swarm package, we're going to go ahead and import Swarm as well as agent. Line 3, we instantiate Swarm with the client variable. Line 5, we instantiate the agent. This time we're naming it my_agent. Since we're utilizing agent, which we imported from the Swarm library, well, in this case, it's going to take in 2 arguments. One is name, the other is instructions. Similar to the last example, this one has a simple set of instructions. You are a helpful agent. Next, in line 11, we declare a function. It states pretty print messages. It's going to take in an argument, and that's going to be messages. It's going to loop over those messages, and if it sees content has the value none, then it's just going to skip over, which means that there was no text in there. But if there is content, in the sense that it has a value, that key, well, then it's going to print this out, which is message sender. So it's going to find out who sent that message, and it's going to print out their message. So here we have on line 18 a variable that is going to represent an empty array. It's called messages. On line 19, we have a variable called agent, and we're going to set it to the value my agent, which is essentially the same as the agent that we instantiated here. Now we have a while loop here, and it's saying while true, we're going to have a variable that we call user input, and we're going to utilize this input method here, which we did not declare. So I'm wondering what's going to happen here. Well, here we have this as the argument. We're going to append this new message, which is the user's input. Okay, so I see what's going on here. Here, we're pretty much utilizing a native Python method called input, which allows the user to actually put in input like a prompt. And we're going to also add this here as one of the strings that we see on the terminal when the user's waiting for their chance to put in their input. Then we're going to literally append whatever the user's input is to the messages array, which is empty right now. And we're also going to make sure that the agent knows that this is the user. From there, we're going to utilize a variable that we create here called a response to save whatever the response is that comes from the agent based on passing in two arguments here, the agent itself and the messages, which will have the user input. Now we're going to go ahead and state messages here, which we're doing inside this while loop, which is why it's not conflicting here. But we're essentially going to reassign messages to response.messages here. Then we're going to reassign the agent to response.agent. And lastly, we're going to print out those messages from the conversation. So I'm going to go over that once more so that you understand. We've instantiated Swarm from the class Swarm. We've also imported agent, and we've instantiated that here utilizing my agent. We've named it agent, and we've given it simple instructions. You are a helpful agent. We've declared a function called pre-print messages. It takes in an argument, which is messages. It's going to loop over those messages, and then it's going to see if there's any content available. If there is no content available, meaning that there are no messages, then it's going to skip over that particular message over the array of messages that it's iterating. Here, if there is messages that have a content, then it's going to go ahead and print out the value of sender, which should be either the user or the agent, and then it's going to print out their message. Now, over here, we do have messages being declared in this variable as an empty array. And I'm not going to say declared, rather defined as an empty array. Here, we have agent being set to my agent. So that's basically just another agent that we're creating. Essentially, it's a reference to that agent. And then we're going to loop over utilizing this while loop. And this is going to create a looping function. So essentially, the user can now enter input in the terminal. We're going to append the user's input and specify that it is the user based on role being user here. We're going to get the response by running the Swarm instantiated client here. And there's a method that's available to us called run that takes in two arguments, the agent and messages. So we've established that agent is agent, which we've created here, and messages is equal to messages. Over here, we're going to essentially set messages to response.messages because it's going to have the response of the agent as well as the input from the user. Here, the response is also going to allow us to have the same agent that responded as part of the return value here in the response from line 24, which is awesome because we've just redeclared what the agent is. And lastly, we're going to print out those messages utilizing pre-print messages. Now, notice that we technically did not pass this in as a function this time. we're literally just utilizing pre-print messages as we normally would with any function we've declared. It's not being passed in to the agent as one of its tools. So that's a bit of the nuance there. So let's go ahead and run that file. So if I go ahead and run this file here, instead of typing it in, I'm just going to copy it from here. And let's paste it here. I'm going to delete function calling. Paste it right here. So simple underscore loop underscore no underscore helpers dot py. Let's go ahead and run that file. So here we have us being prompted to enter an input. So I'll say, who are you? Enter. Now the agent has responded to me. I'm an AI language model created by OpenAI, designed to understand and generate human-like text based on the input I receive. My purpose is to assist you by providing information, answering questions, and helping with a wide range of topics. If you have any questions or need assistance, feel free to ask. How do I get viewers to subscribe to my YouTube after this video? So here's what the agent has told me. The agent has told me to create quality content, engaging call to action, consistent branding, optimize video titles and description, engage with your audience, promote on other platforms, collaborate with other creators, be consistent with uploads, analyze and adjust. Remember, building a loyal subscriber base takes time and dedication, so be patient and persistent with your efforts. Well, you guys heard that. So please subscribe to this video, and I hope that that helps you understand how we're utilizing Swarm with this agentic orchestration. I know that these demonstrations were a bit simple, so I'm going to have this inside an application so that you guys can see it more in a real world context. Here, as I've mentioned numerous times, very simple setup. You're not throwing together a bunch of spaghetti code to assess tool calling, passing in functions here, there, willy-nilly, and then you have like 1,000 lines of code. I think that this can scale out much easier, and you'll actually be able to see which part of the workflow is eating up the most tokens as well. So I think that's also pretty cool. But tune in for my next video. I'm also going to go over one last example, which is airline. I think that that was a pretty good example. So we're going to go into that, and I want you guys to join my Discord because I'm sharing a lot of the resources as well as a breakdown of everything that I discussed in this video. Talk to you soon, Dr. Fullstack.